add your take on Demon Soul or Demon Days, sorry, Demon Days by Gorillaz to this convo. I know you've heard it since you had a plastic beach vinyl in some of your old vlogs. Yeah, actually, I'm surprised I haven't been asked about Gorillaz more often because I don't feel like I've talked about them very much. And they're incredibly influential, both on me and just in general. I've been like a day one Gorillaz fan. I can literally remember the first time I saw Clint Eastwood on TV, which may very well have been the first time it was played on TV. Because I don't think it was played that often. Clint Eastwood, huge influence on me. You know, Dell remains a big influence and a very important artist to me. Um, you know, I had their first album. I listened to it a decent amount, although I was kind of at the time like let down that more of it wasn't. Well, it's not that I minded that it wasn't hip hop. I liked that it was a rock album too and had all these different stuff because it was all genres I was into, but that so many of the songs were like kind of experimental and like slow. You know, they weren't like tight songs the way that Clint Eastwood had been, or Rock the House or 192000, which were all the singles, you know, and I was really into those songs. So when Demon Days came about, I know I never owned a cop. I actually don't own a copy of Demon Days, weirdly. Now that I'm thinking about it, I don't think I've ever owned a physical copy of it, which is kind of odd. When Demon Days came out, I never ended up owning a copy, but I believe a friend gave me a burned copy. I don't even fucking remember who. I don't remember who the hell gave me a burned copy of Demon Days in 2004. But I had a burned copy. It was definitely after the singles had, or at least, like I know I had heard Feel Good Inc. and whatever the second single it was, not El Mañana, was it? I don't think so. Anyway, somebody burned me the CD, and the weirdest thing about it is that they had cut off the second half of the song Demon Days, like where it becomes the gospel song. So for like years, I had no idea that existed at all until I finally like downloaded I think I found out that the song's runtime was supposed to be like twice as long, and I was like, what the fuck? And then found the actual version, and I was like, what the shit? Why did mine cut off? And I'd always thought it was a weird, like the song just cuts off very abruptly. I thought that was a strange thing about the album, that its last song just kind of ends, and it's like that's not the case at all. I don't know if it was like that person just didn't like that part of the song or what. I don't know what it was, but I don't know what was the reasoning. But yeah, I didn't know that Demon Days had a second half for a long time. But suffice it to say, I ran that album into the fucking ground. I can in my head just listen to that album. I don't have to listen to it. I could sit here right now and I could in real time just like stare at the wall and think the whole Demon Days album. Without question, I could do that. I can hear a lot of it like rolling through my head. You know, I can hear the blink, 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 blink. Are we the dating, living dating? Are we the ding, clink, 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 clink? You know, like I hear it all going in my brain. But as as much as I've loved that album and as deeply embedded it is as it is into my consciousness, now it's kind of almost white noise to me to actually listen to a lot of it. Like I think every song on it is dope, but like I'll kind of just dissociate through the first for few songs a lot of the time, and then like kind of wake up when Every Planet We Reach Is Dead comes on, which is probably my favorite song on the album. I ran Demon Days into the ground, a lot of it because that was the first era where that album came out when I was like 13 going on 14, which is when I was first starting to experience depression and like first starting to have gender anxiety and spending a lot of time just in my thoughts and in my feelings. And so I had a hard time like doing stuff, you know, like finding the will within me to play a video game, for instance. So I I fell in love with music in part because it is so passive. It's just something you can kind of let happen, you know? I would like sit in my room and watch Victor play video games and I would play music. So when I think of like Demon Days as an early experience, I inevitably think about like watching Victor play Baten Kaitos Eternal Wings in the Lost Ocean on GameCube because you know that's what he was playing at one of the times I was listening to Demon Days. Coheed and Cambria, you know, with In Keeping Secrets, and like I remember every time I think about that era, I remember that Victor was playing Radiata Stories on PS2 while I was listening to Coheed for the first time. But the great thing about Gorillaz, especially Demon Days, is that it's so accessible to so many types of music fans that like I've never had like a social situation where it's inappropriate to play Gorillaz, you know, like any friend I ever had who didn't already know the band, I could get into them and they would become as big of a fan as I was. So it's just like, to me, basically the most accessible music that you could conceive of, you know. It's just so accessible to, you know, anybody who likes rock or hip hop probably can find something to like about, or pop, about Gorillaz. Demon Days was definitely the height of my being a huge Gorilla fan. I can even remember like when I went to, you know, I've talked about going to an inner city school for a while where I really struggled to make friends, but I do remember one of my most pleasant memories of that time was we had this one class that was like basically like intro to school, like school skills type thing, you know, like you're in high school now, you got to learn how to be a high school student type of a class. It was just like an old blowhard fucking ranting forever. It was very, very boring, very pointless class. It wasn't a class where you really learn anything. But I had the kid who sat next to me, you know, I started talking to him and found out he was a Gorillaz fan. And so there was a point where the two of us literally sat there and just like recited the entirety of the first two albums, like in order, song for song. Because I just kept going. You know, like he kept getting, you know, kind of nervous and getting quiet, and then I would just keep going. Eventually, he'd pick back up, you know, and stuff. It was just, I was just so excited to have something that I cared about to do more than being in that class. But yeah, that was the closest I ever did come to having a friend there. But the few people who I would have been friends with at that school really did not want the reputational damage of being friends with me, so I don't blame them for that. My biggest complaint about early Gorillaz albums is the lack of crediting. Like they were, because you know, I understand they were trying to make it feel like Gorillaz was like a band and not, but whenever a rapper would come in, like on the first album, it was just Del is the voice of the rap. So if that had maintained forever, if it had just always been Del, it could have kept that idea of a band. But as soon as Del wasn't on the project anymore, and you have, you know, I can't even remember who's on All Alone. Like I've never learned their name because again, at the time I had no idea who any of these people were. I just, you know, would hear these songs and be like, oh, that's cool, but who the fuck are these people? You know, eventually I found out who MF Doom was, but for a long time I was just totally clueless. Even though, like, the fact that he's on November Has Come, like, massively influential song. I know all the lyrics to it, you know, On Me. So, like, when I shout out MF Doom, you know, I'm shouting him out basically just because he's on November Has Come, and that is such an important track to me, you know. Not that I'm saying he's not good in general, but I'm by no means the biggest Doom fan. And yeah, so like November Has Come is one of my favorite songs on there. Every Planet We Reach Is Dead is probably my outright favorite just because it's got that epic grandiosity. The whole ending bit where it just really picks up. El Mañana is really good. Fire Coming Out of a Monkey's Head I like a lot, especially because it gave me sort of influence to do that kind of storytelling music, you know? Not that I've really done anything nearly like that. Let me see what you people have been talking about in the chat while I've been ranting about this. I really went off into my own world with that.